The doors to the xenobiology lab slid open with a soft hiss, and Hyun stepped inside with his friend Mira right behind him. The room was enormous, filled with tables designed for species of all shapes and sizes. Some tables were low to the ground for beings that crawled. Others reached high into the air for those with long necks or floating bodies. The walls were lined with specimens in containment fields, glowing softly in dozens of colors. Hyun looked around with interest. This was his first real class with aliens from across the galaxy. Sure, he had seen plenty of different species in the cafeteria and hallways, but this was different. This was where he would actually work with them. "This is so exciting," Mira whispered, her eyes wide as she took in all the different students filing into the room. There was a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, another that resembled a crystalline spider, and several others that defied easy description. The other students glanced at them as they entered. Hyun noticed how some of them looked away quickly while others stared openly. Humans were still new to the Galactic Academy. Their planet had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago, and they had a reputation for being unpredictable. Hyun did not really understand why. He thought humans were pretty normal. They found seats near the middle of the room. Mira immediately pulled out her tablet and started taking notes about the different species she could see. She was studying xenobiology and loved learning about how different life forms evolved. Hyun was an engineering student, but he needed this class for his degree. Plus, it seemed interesting. The professor had not arrived yet, so students chatted quietly among themselves. The noise was strange because each species made different sounds. Some clicked, some hummed, and some made noises Hyun could not even hear. His translator implant worked overtime to convert everything into Korean in his head. Then the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The conversations died away as every student turned toward the door. Even the floating jellyfish creature drifted backward slightly. Hyun looked up to see what had caused such a reaction. 2 massive figures entered the lab. They were easily 7 feet tall, covered in scales that looked like black glass. Their bodies were built like something between a human and a lizard, with powerful limbs and long tails that swayed behind them as they walked. Their hands ended in curved claws that gleamed under the lab lights. But it was their faces that drew the eye. Sharp, angular, with ridges above eyes that glowed a deep red. When one of them yawned, Hyun saw rows of teeth designed for tearing meat. The other students created a path for them automatically, pressing themselves against tables and walls. Some of the smaller species actually trembled. Hyun heard his translator pick up frightened whispers. "Vrex. Those are Vrex. Apex predators. Death World species. Why are they in this class?" The 2 Vrex walked to the back of the room, their movements fluid and confident. They radiated danger the way a furnace radiated heat. The male was slightly larger, with more prominent ridges along his spine. The female had brighter eyes and moved with coiled energy that suggested she could strike at any moment. Hyun watched them with curiosity. He had read about different alien species before coming to the academy, but seeing a Vrex in person was different. They were impressive. He wondered if they were related, maybe siblings. "They are magnificent," Mira breathed beside him. She was already making notes on her tablet. "Look at the muscle structure, and those scales must provide incredible protection." The professor finally arrived, a small 4-armed being who introduced herself as Professor Kelvin. She did not waste time on long introductions. Instead, she immediately began assigning lab partners for the semester. She explained that xenobiology was best learned through direct cooperation with other species. "You will work with your assigned partner on all projects," she said. "This will teach you not just about biology, but about communication and cooperation across species barriers." She began reading names from her tablet. Students were paired seemingly at random, with no regard for species, size, or compatibility. There were a few groans, but most students accepted their assignments quietly. "Hyun, you will partner with Tukreel." Hyun looked up. He did not know which one Tukreel was. "Mira, you will partner with Shenva." The 2 massive Vrex in the back of the room shifted. The male, Tukreel, locked eyes with Hyun. The female, Shenva, looked at Mira. Around them, other students whispered and exchanged glances. A few looked at Hyun and Mira with something like pity. Hyun stood up and walked toward Tukreel with a friendly smile. He could feel the tension in the room, but he did not understand it. They were just lab partners. Why was everyone acting so weird? "Hi." Hyun said when he reached Takril's table. I am Hyun. Nice to meet you. He extended his hand in the traditional human greeting. Takril stared at the hand, then at Hyun's face. His red eyes were unblinking. Up close, he was even more impressive. His scales caught the light in strange ways, and Hyun could see the powerful muscles moving beneath them. The Vrex was clearly built for hunting and killing. After a long moment, Takril slowly reached out and grasped Hyun's hand. His grip was careful, as if he was afraid of breaking something. His claws did not extend, but Hyun could feel their presence against his skin. I am Takril, the Vrex said. His voice was deep and had a slight growl to it, like rocks grinding together. Great, Hyun said, pulling over a chair. So do you know anything about xenobiology? I have to admit, I am more into engineering, but this stuff seems pretty cool. Behind him, he heard Mira introducing herself to Shenva with equal enthusiasm. She was already asking questions about Vrex biology, her translator working rapidly to convert her excited Korean into something Shenva could understand. Takril did not respond immediately. He seemed confused by Hyun's casual attitude. His eyes narrowed slightly and he leaned forward. It was clearly meant to be intimidating. The movement brought his face closer to Hyun's, showing off those impressive teeth. You are not afraid, Takril said. It was not quite a question. Afraid of what? Hyun asked, genuinely puzzled. Takril's tail lashed once behind him, a sign of frustration that Hyun did not recognize. Of me, my species. We are apex predators. Oh, Hyun said. He thought about this for a moment. Well, no, not really. I mean, you have not done anything scary. You seem nice. This was clearly not the response Takril expected. He sat back, his expression unreadable. Across the table, Shenva was having a similar experience with Mira, who was now asking if she could take photographs of Vrex scales for her research project. Professor Kelvin began the lecture, and the class settled into work. Throughout the lesson, Takril kept trying small acts of intimidation. He would extend his claws while reaching for equipment. He would let out low growls when he was thinking. He would position himself to loom over Hyun. Hyun noticed none of it. Or rather, he noticed but did not understand the intent. When Takril growled while reading a specimen chart, Hyun just said, Are you hungry? That sound reminds me of my family's dog before dinner time. When Takril extended his claws while passing a tablet, Hyun said, Wow, those look sharp. Are they retractable? That must be useful. By the end of class, Takril looked more confused than he had at the beginning. Shenva wore a similar expression. They had tried every intimidation tactic they knew, and the humans had simply treated them like normal classmates. As they packed up their materials, Hyun turned to Takril with a bright smile. Hey, so a bunch of us are having dinner tomorrow in the human dormitory. I am cooking Korean food. You and your sister should come. Takril stared at him. Sister? Shenva? Is she not your sister? Sorry, I assumed. She is my clutch sister, yes. Cool. So, dinner tomorrow? Around 6? Takril did not know what to say. In his entire life, he had never been casually invited to share a meal by someone outside his species, especially not by someone who should by all rights recognize him as a threat. We will consider it, he finally said. Great. I will send you the location, Hyun said cheerfully. Then he and Mira left, chatting about the class and what they had learned. Takril and Shenva remained in the lab for a moment after everyone else had gone. What just happened? Shenva asked. Takril shook his head slowly. I have no idea. Takril paced back and forth in the quarters he shared with his clutch sister. His tail swayed with each turn, a physical manifestation of his agitation. Shenva sat on her rest platform, watching him with glowing red eyes that matched his own. This makes no sense, Takril said for the 5th time. They should have requested new partners. Every other species does. They did not even flinch, Shenva added. She flexed her claws, looking at them as if seeing them for the first time. I showed full threat display. The human female Mira, she just asked if she could take pictures. Takril stopped pacing and looked at his sister. They had both been raised with the same understanding of how the universe worked. The Vrex were apex predators. They came from a death world where everything was trying to kill everything else. They had climbed to the top of their planet's food chain through strength, speed, and intelligence. Other species recognized this instinctively and responded with appropriate caution or fear. But these humans acted like they did not understand the basic rules of predator and prey. We need to research them, Takriel decided. There must be something in the galactic database about human behavior. Shenva moved to her terminal and began searching. The galactic database contained information on every species in the known community, including recent additions like humans. She pulled up the human entry and began reading aloud. Species name, human. Origin, Earth, Sol system. Classification, omnivore. Persistence, predator. Death world origin confirmed. Takriel moved closer. Death world? Like ours? Shenva continued reading, her voice growing more uncertain with each line. Environmental conditions. Extreme variation. Temperature ranges from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius. Frequent seismic activity. Hostile microbial life. Gravity 1.0 standard. Atmospheric composition includes free oxygen at dangerous levels. That explains the physical build, Takriel muttered. Humans were shorter than Vrex but had dense muscle structure. Now he understood why. But Shenva had found something else. Her claws tapped against the screen. Brother, listen to this. Hunting method. Persistence predation. Humans chase prey over long distances until the prey collapses from exhaustion. They can run for hours without stopping. A chill ran down Takriel's spine. That was nightmare fuel. The idea of being hunted by something that simply never stopped, that just kept coming no matter what you did, was terrifying on a primal level. Shenva kept reading. Pain tolerance, significantly above galactic average. Humans have been observed continuing to fight with injuries that would incapacitate most species. Bonding behavior extreme. Humans form emotional attachments across species barriers. They have domesticated hundreds of species on their planet, including apex predators. They domesticated their predators? Takriel could not believe it. Shenva pulled up images. They showed humans living with creatures called dogs and cats. Some of the dogs were massive, easily capable of killing a human child. The cats had claws and teeth designed for hunting. But in every picture, the humans were touching these creatures, holding them, even sleeping next to them. They pack bond with anything, Shenva said softly. Look at this, she showed him more images. Humans with creatures called bears, which were enormous predators. Humans with sharks, apex predators of Earth's oceans. Humans with snakes, some of them venomous enough to kill with a single bite. In every case, the humans seemed happy about it. Takriel sat down heavily. This is insane. But Shenva had found something else. Video files. Their entertainment, she said, playing one. It was something humans called a horror movie. Takriel and Shenva watched in confusion as humans on screen ran from a dangerous creature. The background music was designed to create tension and fear, but this was entertainment. Humans scared themselves for fun. Why would anyone do this? Takriel asked. They watched more videos. Humans jumping out of aircraft for recreation. Humans climbing mountains that could kill them. Humans racing vehicles at speeds that would be fatal in a crash. Humans entering metal cages with predators for sport. Then Shenva found the military history files. The database was extensive. Humans had been fighting wars on their planet for their entire recorded history. The sheer creativity of human violence was staggering. They had developed thousands of ways to kill each other, and had refined those methods over centuries. But what struck Takriel most was the scale. Humans fought in groups. They coordinated. They planned. And they never ever gave up. There were records of human military units fighting long after any sane species would have surrendered. Stories of humans carrying wounded companions for miles through hostile territory. Accounts of last stands where humans held positions against impossible odds. They are pack hunters, Takriel said slowly. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally. Everything about them is built around the pack. Shenva closed the files. They sat in silence for a long moment. We should not go to this dinner, Shenva finally said. Takriel's pride bristled. We are Vrex. We do not run from prey species. Are they prey species, though? Shenva asked. Look at what we just learned. They are from a death world. They are persistence hunters. They have pain tolerance beyond most species and pack bonding instincts that let them turn predators into companions. Their entire civilization is built on cooperation and mutual defense. Takriel did not want to admit it, but his sister was right. Humans were not prey. They were something else entirely. Something that did not fit the normal categories. We need to understand them better, he said. That is why we should go. To observe. To learn. Shenva looked skeptical but nodded. Fine, but we show dominance. We prove that Vrex are still apex. The next day, Takriel and Shenva observed the humans more carefully. They watched Hyun in the cafeteria, sharing his food with anyone who asked. They saw Mira helping a small insectoid student who had dropped their tablets, carefully picking them up without damaging the fragile equipment. They noticed how other humans moved through the crowds, always aware of smaller species, always careful not to cause harm. In their xenobiology class, Takriel tried a different approach. When Hyun made a mistake on a calculation, Takriel corrected him. But instead of responding with submission or anger, Hyun just thanked him and asked him to explain the right method. During a break, another student made a dismissive comment about humans being primitive newcomers. Takriel was surprised to feel a flash of anger. Before he could think about why, Hyun had already responded with a good-natured joke that diffused the situation. The human never defended himself aggressively. He did not need to. His confidence was quiet and unshakable. After class, Takriel and Shenva walked back to their quarters to prepare for the dinner. "I do not understand them," Shenva admitted. "They should be afraid. Everything we learned says they should recognize us as dangerous." "Maybe they do," Takriel said slowly. "Maybe they just do not care." "What do you mean?" "They come from a death world like ours. They are apex predators in their own right. Perhaps they see us as equals, not threats." Shenva considered this. It made sense, but it violated everything they had been taught about how species interacted. In the Vrex worldview, there were hunters and hunted. There was hierarchy and dominance. You were either above or below. But humans seemed to operate on a completely different system. "We should prepare," Takriel said, straightening his spine. "Whatever happens at this dinner, we must remember we are Vrex." They dressed in their best attire, which for Vrex meant polished scales and carefully maintained claws. They told themselves they were going to prove dominance, to show these strange humans the proper respect due to apex predators. But as they walked toward the human dormitory, Takriel could not shake the feeling that they were not going to dominate anything. They were walking into something completely outside their experience. The smells hit them first. Even from outside the dormitory, they could detect rich, complex aromas. Cooked meat certainly, but also things they could not identify: spices, vegetables, fermented foods. The scents were overwhelming, and despite himself, Takriel felt hunger stir. They reached the door. Shenva looked at her brother. "Ready?" she asked. Takriel was not sure he was, but he nodded anyway. They pressed the entry chime. A moment later, the door slid open and Hyun's smiling face greeted them. "You came. Come in, come in. Dinner is almost ready." And just like that, they stepped into the human world. The human dormitory common area was smaller than Takriel expected. Everything was sized for human proportions, which meant he and Shenva had to duck slightly through the doorway. But what the space lacked in size, it made up for in warmth and noise. 3 other humans were already there. One young male was setting up a table, moving chairs to make room. A female was bringing dishes from the kitchen area, each one carefully balanced. Another male stood at what appeared to be a cooking station, working alongside Hyun. Music played from somewhere, a rhythmic sound with instruments Takriel did not recognize. The humans were talking over each other, laughing, reaching past one another to grab utensils or ingredients. There was no order to it, no hierarchy that Takriel could detect. It was chaos, but it was happy chaos. "Everyone, these are my lab partners," Hyun announced, gesturing to the 2 Vrex. "This is Takriel and his clutch sister, Shenva. This is Day, my roommate. That is Yuna. She works in hydroponics. And that is Bora helping me cook." Day walked right up to Takriel, showing no hesitation. He was built solidly for a human, with obvious muscle development. He grinned widely and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you. Hyun said you are in xenobiology together. How are you finding the class?" Takriel shook his hand carefully. Day's grip was surprisingly strong. "It is educational." "Great. Hey, after we eat, you want to arm wrestle? I have never tested my strength against a Vrex before." Before Takriel could respond, Yuna appeared in front of Shenva. She held a data tablet and looked concerned. "Hi. So I wanted to check, do you have any dietary restrictions? I brought some vegetables from hydroponics, but I realized I do not know if Vrex can safely eat plant matter." "The last thing we want is to make you sick." Shenva stared at the small human female. She was a full 2 feet shorter than Shenva and probably weighed a third as much. But she was looking up at the massive predator with nothing but friendly concern. We can eat some plant matter, Shenva said slowly, but we primarily consume meat. Perfect. Hyun is making bulgogi, which is beef, really thin slices marinated and grilled. There's also pork belly. And we have kimchi, which is fermented vegetables, but that might be too spicy for your first time trying Korean food. Yuna was still talking as she guided Shenva toward the table. Mira appeared from somewhere and joined them, immediately engaging Shenva in a conversation about digestive system differences between species. Takriel found himself being led to the table by Dae, who was explaining the rules of arm wrestling with great enthusiasm. Hyun called out from the kitchen area, "Sit, sit, make yourselves comfortable. Well, as comfortable as you can. Sorry, the chairs were not built for Vrek's height. Indeed, the chairs were slightly too small." Takriel and Shenva sat carefully, their knees higher than ideal. But the table was at a reasonable height, and they could see everything happening around them, and then the food started arriving. Hyun and Bora brought dish after dish. A large pot of something that smelled rich and spicy, plates of grilled meat still sizzling, small bowls of various items, each one different colors and textures, a large bowl of white rice, more dishes that Takriel could not immediately identify. The amount of food was staggering. This could feed a Vrek's hunting party for days. "Is this a special occasion?" Takriel asked. Hyun looked confused. "No, this is just dinner. Why?" "The quantity of food suggests a feast." All the humans laughed. Dee clapped Takriel on the shoulder, a casual gesture that would be unthinkable in Vrek's culture between non-family members. "Hyun always cooks too much. It is just how he is. But do not worry. Whatever we do not eat tonight, people will take home for later. Nothing gets wasted." Mira started explaining each dish. "This is kimchi jjigae, kimchi stew. This is bulgogi, marinated beef. These small dishes are banchan, side dishes. This is kimchi, this is seasoned spinach, these are bean sprouts. And this is rice, which goes with everything." Yuna demonstrated how to serve yourself, taking a small amount from each dish. In Korean culture, meals are communal. Everyone shares from the same dishes. It is about being together. Takriel watched the humans serve themselves and then carefully did the same. The meat smelled good, he had to admit. When he tried a piece of the bulgogi, the flavors were complex, sweet and savory with undertones he could not quite identify. It was good. Very good. Beside him, Shenva was trying the stew. Her eyes widened slightly. For a Vrex, that was the equivalent of a human's jaw dropping. As they ate, the humans talked. They asked questions about Vrex culture, but not in an intrusive way. They shared stories about their own lives on Earth. Bora told a funny story about learning to cook and accidentally setting off the fire suppression system. Mira talked about the first time she saw an alien species in person and how excited she had been. Dae asked Takriel about Vrex hunting techniques. Takriel described the traditional ambush methods, expecting fear or disgust. Instead, the humans were fascinated. "That is so different from how humans hunted," Hyun said. "We did not have the speed or strength for ambush hunting. We just walked after prey until it was too tired to run anymore." "Persistence hunting," Takriel said, remembering what he had read. "Exactly. It took forever, but it worked. We are built for endurance, not sprints." The conversation flowed naturally from there. They compared hunting methods, talking about the strengths and weaknesses of each approach. The humans treated it like an academic discussion, not a threat assessment. At one point, Shenva mentioned that on their homeworld, Vrex traditionally ate meat raw. There was a brief silence, and Takriel tensed, waiting for the fear response. Instead, Hyun looked thoughtful. "I could do that. Next time, I will prepare some of the meat less cooked, or raw if you prefer. I want you to enjoy the food." The casual assumption that there would be a next time caught Takriel off guard. These humans were already planning future meals together. Then Yuna reached for a glass of water and knocked it over. The glass fell toward the edge of the table. Shenva moved without thinking, her predator reflexes kicking in. She caught the glass before it could fall, moving faster than human eyes could track. Her claws were fully extended around the glass, each one sharp enough to cut through metal. The room went silent. Shenva froze, suddenly aware of what she had done. She had shown her full predatory nature, the speed and claws that made Vrex so dangerous. Every other species at the academy had recoiled when seeing such displays. Yuna blinked, then smiled brightly. "Thank you. That was amazing. I did not even see you move." "Seriously," Dee added, "that reaction time is incredible. Can all Vrex move that fast?" Just like that, the conversation resumed. They were not scared. They were impressed. Takril finally had to ask the question that had been bothering him since they first met. "Do you not fear us?" The humans looked at each other, genuinely confused. "Fear you?" Mira asked. "Why would we? We are apex predators. We are dangerous." Hyun put down his chopsticks and looked at Takril directly. "But you have not done anything dangerous. You have been polite and friendly. Why would we judge you based on what you could do instead of what you actually do?" "Most species recognize the threat," Shenva said quietly. "They maintain distance. They show submission or caution." Bora shook her head. "That seems like a terrible way to make friends. You are our classmates. We work together. You came to dinner. Those are the things that matter. Plus," Dee added with a grin, "humans are pretty dangerous too when we want to be. We just choose not to be. I assume you are making the same choice, right?" It was such a simple way of looking at it. You are capable of violence but choose not to be. That choice is what defines you, not the capability itself. Takril felt something shift in his understanding. These humans did not operate on instinct and fear. They operated on choice and behavior. The rest of the dinner passed in warmth and laughter. The humans taught them how to wrap meat and vegetables in lettuce leaves, creating what they called SSAM. They showed them how to mix rice with stew for better flavor. They shared more stories and jokes. As the evening wound down and Takril and Shenva prepared to leave, Hyun stopped them at the door. "This was really fun. We should do it again next week. Maybe you could tell us more about Vrek's culture? We would love to learn." Takril looked at his clutch sister. They were both full of good food and confused feelings. "We would like that," Takril said, and found that he meant it. Walking back to their quarters, neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Shenva said, "I do not understand them." "Neither do I," Takril admitted. "But I think I want to." That night, Takril lay on his rest platform and thought about the evening. The humans had treated them like equals. Not prey to be protected from, not predators to be feared, just people to share a meal with. It was the strangest thing he had ever experienced. It was also the nicest. 3 weeks passed, and Takril found himself spending more time with the humans than he had planned. It started as simple observation, trying to understand these strange beings who did not follow the normal rules of predator and prey. But somewhere along the way, observation had turned into something else. Friendship, he realized. Though the concept was still strange to him, in Vrek's culture you had your clutchmates, your family group, and your hunting party. Relationships outside those circles were professional at best, competitive at worst. You did not share meals with outsiders. You certainly did not laugh with them or care about their problems. But the humans did all of those things without even thinking about it. Takril was working on an engineering project in one of the academy's workshop spaces when Hyun arrived with food. Not for himself, Takril realized, but for Takril. "I figured you might be hungry," Hyun said, setting down a container.
Bora and I made kimbap earlier.
"It is like sushi but Korean style. Thought you might want to try it." Takril stared at the container. "You brought me food, yeah? You have been here for like 6 hours. I know you probably forgot to eat." He had forgotten, actually. The project had consumed his attention. But how had Hyun known? "Thank you," Takril said, still confused by the gesture. Hyun just smiled and left, already late for his own class. He had gone out of his way, taken time from his day, just to make sure Takril ate. For no reason except that they were friends. Takril opened the container and tried the kimbap. It was good. But more than that, it was thoughtful. That same week, Shenva had her own moment of revelation. She was struggling with an astrophysics assignment, growing more frustrated by the minute. In Vrek's education, if you could not keep up, you fell behind. Showing weakness was dangerous. Other students might see it as an opportunity to advance themselves. But Jin, a quiet human from the literature program who had started joining their study sessions, noticed her frustration. He pulled his chair over and looked at her work. "This part is confusing," he said. "I had trouble with it too. Want me to show you how I figured it out?" "You are not in this class," Shenva said, suspicious. "Why would you help me?" Jin looked genuinely confused by the question. "Because you are struggling and I know how to help. That is what friends do." He spent an hour working through the problem with her, patient and kind. He never made her feel stupid for not understanding. When she finally grasped the concept, he seemed as happy about it as she was. You could have left me to fail, Shenva said. The class is graded on a curve. My failure would improve your ranking even in your other classes. Jin looked horrified. Why would I want my friends to fail? Your success does not hurt me. We can all do well together. It was such a fundamentally different way of thinking. Competition versus cooperation. Individual success versus group success. The Vrex way versus the human way. Shenva was starting to think the human way might be better. The real turning point came a week later in the academy cafeteria. Takriel and Shenva were sitting with their human friends, a regular occurrence now that no longer drew stares. Hyun was telling a story about his family's restaurant on Earth. Mira was laughing. Dae was stealing food from Bora's tray while she pretended not to notice. Then a commotion drew everyone's attention. Across the cafeteria, a large carnivorous alien was looming over a smaller herbivore student. The carnivore was from a species called the Krath, known for their aggressive nature. He was 3 times the size of the smaller student, using his bulk to intimidate. Your species paid tribute to mine for centuries, the Krath growled. Show proper respect, pray thing. The smaller student was trembling, pressed against the wall. Other students nearby pretended not to notice. This was natural hierarchy, Takriel thought. The strong dominate the weak. It was how things worked throughout the galaxy. But then Dae stood up. Hey, the human said, walking toward the situation. His voice was calm but firm. Leave him alone. The Krath turned, surprised anyone would interfere. This is none of your concern, human. I am making it my concern. Dae positioned himself between the Krath and his victim. He was smaller than the Krath, but he stood his ground without fear. Hyun had stood too, moving to flank Dae. Then Mira, then Bora, then Jin. The humans formed a wall between the bully and his target. United without needing to discuss it. You should walk away, Hyun said quietly. There was no aggression in his voice, but there was absolute certainty. The Krath looked at the humans, then at the growing crowd of onlookers. His pride warred with his sense of self-preservation. Finally, he snarled and left, pushing past the humans roughly. The humans immediately turned to check on the smaller student, asking if he was okay, offering to help him report the incident. Within minutes, they had the situation completely diffused and the victim calmed down. Takriel and Shenva had watched the entire thing without moving. Now, as the humans returned to the table, Takriel had to ask, why did you intervene? It was not your problem. In nature, the strong dominate the weak, Dae frowned. Maybe in nature. But we are not in nature. We are in a society. We have rules and standards. Just because someone can be a bully does not mean they should be. You could have been hurt, Shenva pointed out. The Krath are dangerous. So are we, Mira said simply. And there were 5 of us and 1 of him. But more importantly, it was the right thing to do. Takriel felt that shift in his understanding again, like tectonic plates moving. The humans had achieved apex status on their world. They were dangerous, capable predators, but they chose to use that power to protect others rather than dominate them. Is this common for humans? He asked. To defend those weaker than yourselves? Hyun considered the question. I suppose so. I mean, not everyone does it. Humans can be jerks too. But most of us are taught that if you can help, you should help. Strength is not just about what you can do to others. It is about what you can do for others. That night, Takriel could not sleep. He kept thinking about what he had seen. In Vrex society, his strength made him superior. It gave him privilege and status. But human society worked differently. Their strength came with responsibility. The next day in xenobiology class, the professor assigned a major project. Students would work in their partner pairs to research and present on evolutionary adaptations. Takriel and Hyun decided to compare persistence hunting to ambush predation. As they worked over the following weeks, Takriel began to see the differences in their approach. When Takriel found information, his instinct was to keep it to himself until he had analyzed it fully. Competitive advantage. But Hyun immediately shared everything he found, excited to discuss and analyze together. When Takriel made a mistake in his research, he tried to hide it. Showing weakness was dangerous, but when Hyun made mistakes, he openly admitted them and asked for help fixing them. Does nothing embarrass you? Takriel asked after Hyun cheerfully admitted he had completely misunderstood a key concept. Why would being wrong embarrass me? That is how you learn. You think you know something, you find out you are wrong, you learn the right answer. If I pretended to know everything, I would never get better. It was such a simple philosophy, but it required something the Vrex were never taught: the security to show vulnerability. One evening, Takriel and Shenva were invited to help prepare dinner for an even larger group. 20 humans were coming, plus a few aliens who had befriended the humans. The kitchen was chaos as Hyun directed the cooking operation. Takriel, can you slice these vegetables? Your claws are perfect for it. Shenva, could you help Bora with the grill? Your heat tolerance is better than ours. They were being included not as guests, but as part of the team. Their natural abilities were being used not as weapons, but as tools to help the group. It felt good. As they worked, Takriel realized he was happy, genuinely happy. He was part of something larger than himself. He had friends who cared about him not because of his strength or status, but because of who he was. Late that night, after all the food had been eaten and all the guests had left, Takriel and Shenva helped Hyun clean up. Thank you for including us, Takriel said. In our culture, this kind of gathering would only be for clutchmates. Hyun looked up from the dishes he was washing. Well, you are kind of like clutchmates now, are you not? I mean, not by biology, but we are family anyway, family. The humans use that word so freely. For the Vrex, family was blood and biology, but for humans, family was choice and connection. I think I am beginning to understand humans, Shenva said quietly. Hyun grinned. Yeah? What have you figured out? That you are terrifying, she said, but in a completely different way than we expected. Terrifying how? Takriel answered. You have all the capability for violence that we do. Maybe more, but you choose kindness instead. You turn enemies into friends. You protect the weak. You share everything freely. It is not natural. It is not instinct. It is choice, and that is far more powerful than any predator instinct. Hyun thought about this for a moment, then shrugged. I guess we just decided being kind is better than being scary. Life is too short to spend it alone at the top. That simple statement contained more wisdom than Takriel had learned in his entire life before meeting these strange, wonderful humans. The Academy's annual cultural festival was approaching, and the human students had decided to do something ambitious. They wanted to host a massive communal dinner, open to all species where everyone would cook and eat together. It was a very human idea, Takriel thought. Of course they wanted to feed everyone. Hyun had asked Takriel and Shenva to help organize the event, and they had agreed without hesitation. Over the past months, something fundamental had changed in how they saw themselves and the world around them. They were still Vrex, still apex predators, but now they understood that being apex meant something different than they had been taught. The planning took weeks. They had to arrange for cooking equipment that could handle multiple species requirements. They needed to source ingredients that were safe for dozens of different biologies. Most challenging, they had to create a space where species that normally avoided each other would feel comfortable eating side by side. This is going to be amazing, Mira said during one planning session. She had a tablet covered in notes and diagrams. We have 47 species confirmed attending. 48, Jin corrected. The Crystalline Collective just responded. They want to try human food. Bora looked worried. Can they even eat our food? They are made of silicon. We will find out, Hyun said cheerfully. Worst case, they just enjoy the company. Takriel watched them plan with admiration. The humans approached every obstacle with optimism and creativity. When they learned that 3 different species had dietary needs that seemed incompatible with the planned menu, they simply expanded the menu. When they discovered that 2 species had historical conflicts and might not want to attend together, they designed the seating to give them space while still keeping them part of the larger group. Problems were not barriers to the humans. They were just puzzles to solve. The day of the festival arrived. The humans had somehow secured the Academy's largest common area and transformed it. Long tables were arranged in a huge circle so everyone could see each other. Portable cooking stations were set up with different heat sources and equipment for different species' needs. Banners hung from the ceiling with welcoming messages in dozens of languages. Takriel and Shenva arrived early to help with final preparations. They were putting up the last decorations when other students started filtering in. The first few arrivals were hesitant, not sure what to expect. But the humans greeted each one warmly, explained the concept, and invited them to start cooking. Within an hour, the space was filled with students from across the galaxy. Some were at cooking stations, learning to prepare food under human instruction. Others were setting tables or arranging serving dishes. The air was thick with 100 different scents, the sound of multiple languages mixing together. Hyun stood in the middle of it all, coordinating with the calm efficiency of someone conducting an orchestra. He showed a nervous herbivore species how to grill vegetables. He helped a methane-breathing student whose translator was malfunctioning. He laughed and joked and made everyone feel welcome. Takriel felt pride watching him. His friend was in his element, using food to build bridges between species that had never even spoken to each other before. The dinner itself was magnificent. Dishes from dozens of worlds covered the tables. Human Korean food mixed with crystalline substrate arrangements, with gaseous suspension meals with liquid nutrient solutions. It should have been chaos. Instead, it was beautiful diversity. Students were trying each other's foods, asking questions about ingredients and preparation methods. Barriers were breaking down with every shared meal. A large carnivore species that normally intimidated others was gently teaching a small avian species how to use human chopsticks. A plant-based collective was having an animated discussion about fermentation with Bora, who was fascinated by their natural biochemical processes. But then there was a problem. Two students from different species got into an argument. Takriel did not hear what started it, but suddenly they were standing, voices raised, aggression radiating from both of them. One was from a species called the Dravik, the other from the Hellorn. Their peoples had been at war 2 generations ago, and old hatreds ran deep. The Dravik pushed the Hellorn. The Hellorn pushed back harder. Other students backed away, not wanting to be involved. The situation was escalating fast. Takriel moved without thinking. He stepped between them, using his size to separate them physically. Shenva appeared on his other side, flanking him. Together they created a wall that neither combatant could get past. "Stop," Takriel said. His voice was calm but carried the weight of someone who expected to be obeyed. The Dravik glared at him. "This does not concern Vrex. You are at our gathering," Shenva said. "You are disturbing our friends. It concerns us." The Hellorn tried to push past Takriel to get at his opponent. Takriel simply moved to block him again, using his body as a shield. He was not aggressive, not threatening, just immovable. Hyun appeared with Day and Mira right behind him. The humans fanned out, creating more space between the combatants. "Hey," Hyun said gently. "Whatever this is about, fighting will not fix it. You are both here to eat, to meet people, to have a good time. Do not ruin that over old anger." "His people killed my grandparents," the Dravik spat. "And his people killed mine," the Hellorn responded. There was a long, tense silence. Then Jin stepped forward. The quiet human looked at both of them seriously. "My grandparents killed each other too," he said. "Korea was divided for decades. Families were torn apart. People died in terrible ways. That pain is real. That history matters. But if we let old wounds keep us apart forever, then all those deaths mean nothing. The only way to honor the dead is to build something better for the living." The words hung in the air. The Dravik and Hellorn looked at each other. Really looked, perhaps for the first time seeing past the species to the person. I'm sorry about your grandparents," the Dravik finally said. "I am sorry about yours, too," the Hellorn replied. They did not become friends in that moment, but they nodded to each other with grudging respect and moved to opposite sides of the gathering. The crisis was over. Takriel realized he was shaking slightly, not from fear but from the intensity of the moment. He had used his predator nature, his size and presence, not to dominate or hurt but to protect, to create space for peace. Shenva touched his arm gently. "We did well," she said. The feast continued, the tension slowly dissolving back into warmth and conversation. As the evening wore on, Takriel found himself at one of the grills, showing a group of younger students how to cook meat properly. He was patient with them, encouraging exactly how Hyun had been with him months ago. Near the end of the night, Mira brought out a gift for Takriel and Shenva. It was a photograph from that first dinner, printed and framed. All of them were around the table, smiling. Takriel remembered how uncomfortable he had been that night, how confused and uncertain. "You are family now," Mira said simply. "We wanted you to have this family." That word again. But now Takriel understood what it meant in the human sense. Not blood, but choice. Not biology, but bond. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was rougher than usual. The next semester brought new Vrex students to the academy. They arrived with the same attitudes Takriel and Shenva had once carried. Apex predators expecting fear and respect based on their nature. Takriel saw them in the cafeteria on their second day, attempting to intimidate a group of smaller students. He walked over, Shenva beside him. The new Vrex students saw them and straightened, recognizing fellow Vrex. They expected solidarity. "These are our friends," Takriel said quietly, gesturing to the students they had been bullying. "You will treat them with respect." The new students were confused. "But we are Vrex, we are Apex. These are prey species." "No," Shenva said. "They are people. Same as us, same as you. Being Apex means nothing if you use it to hurt others." The new Vrex did not understand, but they backed down, uncertain in the face of Takriel and Shenva's calm certainty. Later, Hyun found Takriel in the library. "I heard what you did in the cafeteria. Thank you for standing up for the others." "They are our friends," Takriel said. "Of course I would protect them." Hyun smiled. "You have changed a lot since that first day in lab." "You know that?" Takriel thought about it. Had he changed? Or had he just learned what he was capable of being? "You showed me a different way to be Apex," he said. "Before I met you, I thought being at the top meant being alone, being feared. But you taught me that real strength is lifting others up." "You taught yourself that," Hyun corrected. "I just made you dinner." That night, the usual group gathered in the human dormitory. It had become tradition, weekly dinners where anyone could come. The group had grown to include over 30 regular attendees from at least 20 species. The humans had bought more tables and chairs to accommodate everyone. Takriel and Shenva helped Hyun cook as they always did now. They had learned to make several Korean dishes themselves, though Hyun claimed they still used too much heat and not enough patience. As they ate, Takriel looked around the table at all the different faces, all the different species. They were laughing together, sharing food, telling stories. A few months ago, half of them would not have been in the same room without fear or aggression. Now they were friends. The new Vrex students had been invited. They sat at the far